have to add a fuel stabilizer to where it doesn't deteriorate. But there'll be things to do. There'll be brake pads to replace. There'll be windshield wipers to replace.
Right? I mean, there will be less.
Well, but how much goes wrong on the oily bits in today's car? I mean, they never do anything on an engine
I guess they
anymore.
just look at it.
They don't do anything on an automatic transmission anymore.
Carburetor job.
Yeah, you know this.
Who killed the carburetor?
We've got to replace your points, and while we were at it, we did the plugs and so forth. I mean, that's gone. So I think it'll be
Replace
about
plugs,
the same,
condenser.
and then people will get scratches and marks.
I did that car.
And we hope the dealers sell accessories. We're going to have all kinds of neat Volt accessories that you will want to own.
Really? Is there going to be a Volt body kit?
But there'll be all kinds of stuff that you could power electrically. We'll have, maybe photovoltaic blankets to where you're out having a picnic. You put out your unroll your solar arrays, plug them into the car, and while you're out while you're having the beach party, your car is recharging.
We'll take all suggestions.
I have a big picture crazy.
No, but
Oh, you will get
it's an interesting theory.
If 90% of a car is recycled,
Yeah.
and there's a whole business around people who are dismantling cars and redoing things with it, why couldn't GM get into that business? Just a second. And for a premium, sell, let's say, Volts that are made out of old GM cars. The recycled car, you get the really green. You get the people who really want to pay an extra $5,000 for a car that's totally recycled.
All right.
There's going to be a really big.
There's
going to be a really big story on this, but we're not going to tell you what it is yet.
Okay.
But you're already buying recycled cars every time you buy a car.
Exactly, exactly. And the problem with your scheme is the neighbors don't see that you've paid $5,000 more for a totally
make them a special
environmentally
color.
pure car.
Make it special.
Already our dealers are selling hybrid badges faster than they're selling Tahoe hybrids, okay? And it's not because thieves are prying them off. So if you added a special color or a special decal, very quickly other vehicles would be painted in that color. I honestly don't think that works, but I thought you were going to ask a different question.
Well, pretend I asked that.
But he didn't. That's another story for another day.
Another story for another day.
Well, speaking of the older GMs that are crushed, I'm just wondering if you have any sense of the people who consider themselves brand loyalists, like GM brand loyalists, who are the enthusiast market, but who aren't necessarily going to buy a brand new Cobalt, or aren't necessarily going to buy a Volt. The Camaro guys and the GTO guys and the Corvette guys, and people who have like a '57 Bel Air, like restored cars and stuff. I wonder if there's anything in your guys' strategy about harnessing the enthusiast culture, the way, for example, Mopar has. If that's something that you can see connecting with going forward, or if the strategy is more
we will, even though I think it's right now maintaining the performance car, good old boys, the Mopar lads in the case of Chrysler, and the big block Chevy guys and the Pontiac GTO guys, they sort of gravitated to it naturally. They don't require any encouragement. And frankly, right now, it's just not one of our priorities. I mean, sort of maintaining the muscle car image right now is hey, if it gets maintained, it's fine. If it doesn't, that's sad, but it's okay too, because we cannot be preoccupied with the past and allow ourselves to be sort of pulled by nostalgia into working the old formula. What we really have to do is we've got to be firmly focused on the future and telling ourselves, thanks to oil prices, thanks to environmental concerns, and thanks to government regulations, we are in a new world. And how are we going to deal with that new world? And whenever there's discontinuous change, some people are going to be left behind. And 20 years from now, somebody's going to say, gosh, isn't it a shame? Remember how great the Camaro was and so forth? And you say, yeah, that's right.
Well, that's the
But it's
question.
just like there's still fighter pilots who say, boy, the last great airplane they built was the P-51 Mustang.
Cadillac
And
and
ever
Sky.
since, and when the propellers came off, that was it.
That was the end of good
So,
That
flying.
was the end of it.
the enthusiasts of the class cars are like dead to you.
No.
No.
No, 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 no,
Yeah.
no.
I mean, he's smiling at me because we were talking about this before, and I was going to ask you, and it goes in with. I mean, I don't necessarily agree that GM has sworn off the collector car people because
No.
the Camaro is pretty, looks like a '69 Camaro to
He
me.
was arguing that it's too retro.
It's way too retro, and I think that.
Oh, but it's not as retro as the Challenger and the Mustang.
And I think that, and I've got the Mustang sales back to 1969, 1966, and Camaro sales to show that actually the Mustang, despite everybody's saying that the retro Mustang has been such a success, it actually is not successful compared to their forward-thinking looks that were the last Fox bodies. So what, I mean, it is retro because I mean, you look at the grill, and the grill is definitely '69.
It's reminiscent of. But
It's resto
it
mod.
is, wait a minute, it is a new design language,
Sure.
and it is nowhere near as slavishly retro
Sure,
as
yeah.
the Mustang and the
Challenger.
which- those two,
Or the
I
GT.
sometimes, depending on how they're painted and what accessories they have on them, I have trouble at first glance picking out whether it's an old one that somebody put modern wheels and tires on.
Only wheels and tires that you can go by usually in the
Or
size.
whether it's a new one. And I have that problem with the Mustang and the Challenger, which is not to say that they're not completely legitimate cars, but we deliberately stayed away from that. We had some early proposals that were, in retrospect, way too close to the 67s and 69s. And it was frankly Rick Wagner who said, why are we doing this? And we said, well, it's kind of like Ford and Chrysler are doing. And Rick said, no, let's not do that. Because we're going to sell this car all over the world. And we're going to sell it in many parts of the world where people don't know what a 67 Camaro is. And they're going to evaluate this as either an attractive or unattractive sports coupe. So could we please come up with a design that not only reminds people of a 67 Camaro, but basically is a thoroughly new and attractive design. And we have made, I think, a pretty radical departure to the point where all of the 67 and 69 Camaro loyalists write us and say, congratulations, you
Sure.
have totally screwed it up.
Well, I mean,
Is it going to come with a stick shift in its first run? I mean, some of our members have been wondering because, the initial run of the Challenger is just going to be an automatic. So I'm wondering if it's going to have a manual transmission available.
It will have a manual transmission.
It will, good.
That's a good question, and it reminds me of a question I wanted to ask you. Do you think that the manual transmission is going away? And I asked this because
it's basically going away.
Why is it going
It's basically going
because of
away
this.
as,
I hate that.
With gas
I hate
mileage
that.
too.
we all hate it. We all love manual transmissions, but the fact is it's so hard to beat emissions with a manual transmission.
Oh, I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
it's worse on emissions?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Well, it gets better
way
mileage.
way bad.
Why is that? I didn't know.
Well, because with an automatic transmission, you can control the shift points with software.
Just
And
like the
the driver
Toyota
can't
transmission
override.
stinks.
So we can pick the shift points on the acceleration schedule to where we never quite close the throttle and so forth, whereas if you're driving a manual, you come out of first, you lift your foot off the throttle, it closes, and you've noticed that on modern manuals, instead of the fuel shutting off right away, it kind of goes, the RPMs don't drop suddenly, they drop gradually. That's because we put
Like a governor.
no, it's like a viscous damper in there
Yeah.
to prevent the throttle from closing too fast, which in turn causes you to have long shifts, or you're overriding the synchronizers in second gear.